Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for taking some time out of your day to join us as we release a new report evaluating how things have been panning out on university campuses over the last few months. I'm Corey Saylor. I'm the Research and Advocacy Director in Islamic Relations. I'll give a few introductory remarks, then I will pass it over to our report author, Farah Afifi. She will cover the report, and then if we have any questions, we'll take care of those. So it should be a fairly quick press conference. Since October, we have been discussing a massive spike in Islamophobia in the United States, concurrent with the latest round of violence in the Middle East. While any wave of Islamophobia has certain characteristics, such as bias and bigotry and violent attacks on people, this particular wave has had two sort of standout characteristics. One, the targeting of the very personal targeting of employees in their places of work, such as people going to rallies and then being called in by HR later in the week, or just the corporation clamping down on employees talking about the issue. And then also, since October, we have seen significant targeting of students, and that started on our radar, at least, particularly with the doxing of students either through digital trucks that were driving around at Harvard or mass doxing Google Sheet that was circulated with names and personally identifiable information. So this wave has been ongoing for quite some time. And unfortunately, at many university campuses, administrations, rather than engaging in uncomfortable conversations with students, which is a value and an expectation at higher education settings, right? Uncomfortable conversations. Kind of that's the point to a large degree. Many university administrations have decided to opt for police batons and tear gas instead of engaging in these conversations. So, it's just a reality. When people feel unheard, they protest. This is an American tradition. If you go back to the Boston Tea Party, women's movement to get women the right to vote, the civil rights movement, protest was integral to all of that. And yet, once again, we find the people and institutions where that history is taught turning to the same tactics that unfortunately have been deployed against past protesters. Right now, recently, the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding issued a report in which they found 68% of students felt they had been targeted by people in positions of authority. That's the background for this report. What I'm going to do is turn it over to my colleague, Farah Afifi, and let her discuss with you the report, its content, and most importantly, the recommendations. And then we'll take any questions. Thank you, Farah. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Corey, and hello, everyone. As Corey stated, my name is Farah Afifi. I am the Research and Advocacy Coordinator, and I'm also the primary author of the new report released today, Hostile: How Universities Target Anti-Genocide Protesters While Enabling Anti-Palestinian Racism and Islamophobia. Just this morning, we not only released this report, but we also delivered it to over 400 university and college leaders across the country. And this report is really, as the title suggests, an analysis of incidents at over 30 universities and colleges, demonstrating how these institutions have failed to protect and have also targeted Palestinian, Arab, Muslim, Jewish, African American, and other students who are protesting against the genocide in Gaza. As a result of these actions, universities have not only created a threatening environment for Palestinian, Arab, Muslim, and other students, but have also undermined the very existence of the university as a bastion of free speech and academic freedom. Today, I'll be taking you through some of the key top-line trends coming out of the report, as well as the recommendations that we delivered to universities earlier this morning. In terms of the report, we note really two key trends across university campuses since October 2023. The first of those is that universities have failed to protect Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim students who are being physically attacked, verbally harassed and assaulted, and doxxed, not just by external people and external organizations, but by members at their very own institutions. And that includes staff, students, and even their own faculty. At the George Washington University, for example, we note how Muslim and Palestinian students have reported being physically assaulted while on campus. Muslim students have reported having their hijabs ripped off. Muslim and Palestinian students have reported being spat at. And while some students have reported these incidents to the university, they also claim that the president's continued remarks and statements in support of the Israeli government without acknowledging the Palestinian civilian death toll have directly led to a hostile environment for them on campus and fueled these attacks against them. In another incident at the University of Michigan, an advisory board member at the School of Information was caught on video verbally harassing and verbally assaulting Arab and Muslim students who were protesting for Palestinian human rights. She reportedly made statements to them such as, "Are you going to send one of your terrorists after us?" And then also called Arab and Muslim students rapists and murderers. And even though over 100 faculty, students, and staff and other university affiliates came forward to call for her removal, the dean of the School of Information reportedly said that she did not plan to take any retaliatory action against this advisory board member. And then finally, at Emory University, there have been a host of incidents in which Muslim, Palestinian, and Arab students have been physically assaulted and verbally harassed. But I want to point out a specific incident of doxing that also occurred at that university when an alumnus of the business school reportedly made a LinkedIn post tagging a faculty member and several students and called Students for Justice in Palestine at Emory terror-related, and then also called for the expulsion of students. Now, this post was liked and circulated by other staff and faculty. And not only did those staff and faculty not receive any repercussions for circulating the post, but even when students went to a dean at the business school and asked for their intervention, the dean reportedly responded with, "When you say free Palestine, you are implicitly associating yourself with terrorism," and thereby dangerously suggesting that fighting for Palestinian human rights is somehow violent and hateful. The incidents that I'm mentioning here are egregious, but unfortunately, they are only a very, very small sample of the incidents that we have seen across the country that are known to us, in which Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim students have become targets, not just by external people, but even by members of their own institution, and universities have failed to protect them from these attacks. Now, the second key trend that we're seeing is that universities themselves are targeting their own students, seemingly sacrificing their purported claims to academic freedom, free speech, and open inquiry. We have seen university leaders introduce arbitrary school policies, cancel events featuring Palestine and Palestinian and pro-Palestine speakers, and even call police against their own students who are peacefully and legitimately protesting against genocide in Gaza. For example, we have seen a number of instances, particularly in this moment in April and May 2024, in which law enforcement and especially police violence have been used against student protesters. For example, at Emory, Emerson, Columbia, and a number of other institutions, we have seen reports that students have been held down and tased, that students have been bleeding and denied medical attention, that students have been struck by rubber bullets. And again, this is just a sampling of the kinds of egregious police violence we have seen used against student protesters who are peacefully calling for an end to genocide. But beyond just authorizing law enforcement against students, universities internally have also attempted to leverage school policies against students for several months now. For example, at American University, a school policy was introduced in January 2024 banning indoor protests after a term of student activism from their chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine. They then shortly used that policy later that term to take disciplinary action against Students for Justice in Palestine for holding a very peaceful indoor silent walk of a university building. And then lastly, we've even seen universities attempt to shut down university-approved means of discussing Palestine, such as student-led referendums calling on the university to divest from companies that are profiting from genocide. At Vanderbilt, for example, a divestment referendum was unilaterally canceled by administrators. And at Pomona, the president reportedly condemned a divestment resolution introduced by students, suggesting that divestment from companies profiting from genocide was somehow indicative of hateful or violent behavior. So clearly, universities have become incredibly hostile spaces for Palestinian, Arab, Muslim, Jewish, and other students who are anti-genocide. And again, this is not only a threat to Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim students on these campuses, but it is a threat to the very existence of the university as a space of academic freedom, free speech, open inquiry, and engaging in controversial political speech. So we conclude our report with a number of recommendations to ensure the safety of all students and also to ensure that the university adheres to its commitments of academic freedom and open inquiry. Our primary recommendation is that universities immediately move to engage in good faith negotiations with student protesters. We also call on universities to establish accountability measures so that those negotiations are respected by all parties in the long term. Our second recommendation is for universities to urgently stop weaponizing law enforcement against students and call on all criminal charges to be dropped against them. Again, we have seen a number of incidents of egregious police violence against students, and it is really unnecessary, especially because students are engaging in peaceful, clear, and legitimate protest. We contend that the only way to put an end to these protests is to engage in good faith negotiations with students, not resort to police batons, tasers, and tear gas. We also call on universities to stop introducing arbitrary school policies and to drop disciplinary charges against students who have received punishments due to these policies. These policies have directly and unfairly targeted pro-Palestinian students, and it is critical that the university move to protect free speech, even when it may not be popular. Finally, we also are issuing an urgent call for universities to protect Palestinian, Muslim, and Arab students. That includes investigating complaints of discrimination against them, especially when it comes from members of their own institution. And we're also calling on them to establish mandatory trainings on anti-Palestinian racism and Islamophobia. And that concludes the presentation that I'll give here today. There are many more recommendations we include in the report, but for now, I'll pass it back to Corey, and I encourage any questions regarding the report that you all may have.
Thank you very much, Farah. We appreciate that summary of 20 pages in just a few minutes. As things move into the summer, and in many places, students are going home, do you have any recommendations about what good faith negotiations look like over the summer break?
Yeah, I think one, it's incredibly important for those protest encampments that do still exist for university administrators to engage in good faith negotiations. But again, as I mentioned a little bit during the presentation, good faith negotiations is not just for the current moment, but it is also for the future to establish accountability measures that respect any agreements that were come to during that period. I also would include, in good faith negotiations, to drop disciplinary charges against students who have been peacefully protesting for Palestinian rights. We have seen a number of incidents in which university administrators have attempted to leverage disciplinary action against students who are engaged in these protest encampments. And I would say that that is not good faith negotiations at all, and actually threatens to break down communication between administrators and between students, and ultimately thwart a peaceful resolution to these protest encampments.
Okay, and the one other question that came to me this morning is you discuss very briefly in the report the Palestine exception. Can you expand on what the Palestine exception is and how it applies, particularly in this moment to these protests?
Of course. So the Palestine exception has been cited by many. Essentially, it is the idea that there is a lower tolerance for speech in support of Palestine or pro-Palestinian speech than there is for other free speech. And we see this, for example, again, in the introduction of arbitrary school policies that are then shortly after used explicitly to discipline pro-Palestinian students or pro-Palestinian student groups. So I gave the example of American University. To give you another example, of course, at Columbia University, there was a report that emerged that university administrators had introduced new school policies and then referred to that language to suspend Jewish Voice for Peace and Students for Justice in Palestine just days later. So that is one instance where we see that arbitrary school policies are being wielded against students who are pro-Palestine or student groups who are pro-Palestine in a way that reinforces that Palestine exception, making it impossible or making it difficult for students to express free speech in support of Palestine in a way that they would not face for expressing other forms of free speech.
Okay. And thank you very much to Farah Afifi, the Research and Advocacy Coordinator with the Council on American Islamic Relations. She is the author of the new report, Hostile, that is out this morning and available for one-on-ones or interviews with both of us throughout the day. That ends our press conference this afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern. We'll have a less formal conversation about the report. So if you'd like to join us there, we'd also welcome having you. But that ends our press conference for this morning. Thank you all very much for giving us your time.